In this video, we are going to be talking about angle measures and how they relate on an XY axis and how to find angle measures given some type of angle on an XY axis. So we do need to think back to geometry a lot in this section. One thing I want to point out is the XY axis and the fact that the XY axis are two intersecting perpendicular lines. So the angles are all 90 degrees. And if we were to start at 0 here and go up to where we have the positive y-axis, that would be a 90-degree angle. If we kept going to the negative x-axis, we have 180 degrees. And then if we go further down to the negative y-axis, we have 270 degrees. And then if we were to keep going and continue rotating around, you have 360 degrees. We're going to be talking about that more, but just kind of keep that very, very primitive picture I just drew in your mind. The 0, the 90, 180, 270, and then we finish back around. It's one full circle back around to 360 degrees. So now if we look at angle measures, we have different types of angle measures we could find given identical angles on the XY axis. All three of those angles are the same. If we want a positive angle measure, we're going to start at the initial side. And there's always an initial and a terminal side of the angle. So we're going to start at the initial and go up to the terminal side. And that is a positive angle measure. That's how we're going to find it. The negative angle measures go in the opposite direction. So we still start at the initial and terminal. We just go in the opposite direction, and that's going to be a negative angle measure. And then we also have a positive angle measure greater than 360 degrees. So to find that angle measure, or to look at the picture, we're going to start at the initial side. We're going to go past the terminal side because we want greater than 360. So we need to make a full loop of the XY axis. And then that right there is 360. And then we have to keep going to the terminal side. So notice how it's 360 degrees plus the initial angle, positive angle that we already had. We're going to have to keep that in mind for the examples that we do today. So we need to find an angle in standard position. So what is the measure of the angle shown? If we look at this, we have the initial side and the arrow, the kind of partial loop that is made on the inside of the angle tells you how that angle is opening up. So we have the initial, and then we have the terminal side. So that's the terminal side. I have a terminal side and then initial down here. So what we're looking for is this angle in here. This is theta. But we don't know anything else other than theta, the initial side of the angle, the terminal side. We do know this point, and that's going to help us out. If we draw a vertical line from that point to the x-axis, we actually see that this is a right triangle. So everything we were learning last section with the trig ratios is going to come into play here with this example. So if we look at this triangle, the length of the bottom side is 4. Even though we're over on the negative x-axis, that's still 4 positive units. And then the height is the same thing as the y value, which is 4 square root of 3. So we do have a triangle, and we can label this angle down here as beta. We're going to use that angle beta to find theta. If we think back to geometry and what we know about a straight angle, or what I just showed you with the fact that the first quadrant is 90 degrees, and then the second quadrant is 180 degrees, if we can find beta, we can take 180 minus beta to get theta. So what we are going to do is we're going to use the trig ratios. We have to refer to beta. That's the angle that is within this triangle. So we have the opposite side because we have to go through the triangle to the side length. So the opposite side is 4 root 3. And then the adjacent side is the other leg that you don't have to go through the triangle to get to, and that is 4. So we have the opposite and the adjacent. You want to think of which trig ratio refers to the opposite and the adjacent, and that would be tangent. So we have tangent of beta is equal to the opposite over adjacent. So if we add in the measures there, we sub those in, we have tangent of beta is equal to 4 root 3 over 4. We can simplify this down by canceling out the 4's. And we have tangent of beta is equal to root 3. So this is where you do have to think back to geometry. To find an angle measure, we can use the inverse tangent. And that is on your calculator. So you can find the inverse tangent as long as it is in degrees. You will get beta is equal to 60 degrees. So if beta is equal to 60 degrees, 180 minus 60 is equal to theta, and 180 minus 60 is 120. So theta is equal to 120. So now we're going to go over another example. Given the initial and the terminal sides, we need to find a positive angle measure, a negative angle measure, and an angle measure greater than 360 for the angles below. So you guys are going to do this one on your own. We're going to do part B together. So we have to pay attention to where the initial and the terminal side is, and this will always tell you. So since it is starting on the x-axis and then the arrow loops over to the terminal side. And the only thing we have to work with that the book gave us was 25 degrees. And that's this measure in between the negative y-axis and the terminal side of the angle. But we do know that we have 90 degrees here, 180 degrees here, and 270 degrees here. And that is really going to help us out. So we need a positive angle measure. So if we look at this, we have past 180 degrees, but less than 270. And we actually specifically have 25 degrees less than 270. So to get the positive angle, we can take 270 minus 25, which gives us 245. And then we also need the negative angle measure, which we have to remember goes in the opposite direction. It starts at the same initial side, but then goes to the terminal side. So in reverse, we have starting at 0, and then going in the opposite direction. Instead of 270 here, because we're going in the opposite direction, we have negative 90 degrees. We could go further, and this is negative 180 degrees. And this is negative 270 degrees. It works the same way, it's just going to switch the sign. So if we look at that, we have negative 90 degrees and then 25 degrees more. So negative 90 degrees plus, but because we're going in the opposite direction, we're going to say negative 25 degrees. And if we add those together, we get negative 115 degrees. Now we need an angle measure that is greater than 360. So that would be, looking at this angle, you start at the same initial side, you go past the terminal side, one full loop, so that is 360. So we already know that we're going to have 360 plus, and we keep going. We keep going until we reach that terminal side. So it is going to be 360 plus that first angle, which is 245 degrees. And if we add those two, we get 605.